Thank you for your patience. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Turtle Island and that this is Treaty 1 land and that the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, and that we're walking on this path of reconciliation in their territory. I'd like to thank you for your patience. Sandi is here. She has been a great resource to therapists at Children's Therapy Initiative Winnipeg over the years, doing visioning for therapy service provision in Winnipeg, change management and transition planning workshops for therapists moving here to SSCY, and reminding us that we need to care for ourselves in order to care for the children and families we serve, which is why we invited her here today to speak to us about vicarious trauma amongst healthcare professionals. So please welcome Sandi. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. First off, I have to apologize profusely. One of the things I hate most in my life is to be late. And look at me. I'm so sorry. But sometimes that's unavoidable. So I'll try and run through this as fast as I can because I know you don't have. Can you hear me at the back? The webinar. Oh shoot. That's too bad. I'm a roamer. Oh, well, I like being closer to the people I'm speaking to. Anyway, vicarious trauma is a subject near and dear to my heart. It's actually not part of my job. I'm the regional manager for organization and staff development with WRHA. And this is something I do because I'm passionate about it. And I think healthcare professionals need to know about it and need to know how to help yourself. So please stop me if anybody has any questions. How many of you have heard this before? There's very familiar faces. Too many of you have heard this before, so you can go to sleep. I hope I don't bore you too much. So let's get started. What is vicarious trauma? Well, it's known by many titles, similar concepts. Some people call it compassion fatigue. It's sometimes heard about as secondary traumatic stress, but I prefer the term vicarious trauma because it actually, in my mind, suits, fits more appropriately to what it actually is. Have you ever been asked how you do this all day? Have any of you ever been asked that question? Can I take this out and walk with it? Oh, yeah. That is much better. So what's your answer when you get asked that question? How do you respond to that?
For the little celebrations of success, no matter how small they may be, and focus on those little.
So you focus on the small celebrations of success. Anybody else got an answer? We probably don't even understand why people ask us that. Because why wouldn't we do what we do all day? We've chosen that. But think about that question because many people will ask that even if they don't say it to you. They'll ask you that in their own mind. Consider this, the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. And yet we do that. We go through school, we launch into our careers, and we expect that we can do the work we do and not get wet. Because that's just what we love to do. But there's lots of positives to the work we do as well, and I don't want anybody to forget that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a nurse. I'm the regional manager of OSD right now. But I'm a nurse, and I've been a nurse for 40 years. So this is something that has impacted me in my career. And I really don't want you to forget the strengths and the positives of the things we do. Over time, we can develop a much stronger sense of strength.
We have our own self-knowledge within ourselves, confidence, sense of meaning in life, a spiritual connection, a respect for human resiliency, and we learn to reframe success. Just as your colleague here said, one of the ways we do what we do all day is we reframe success. Little small successes. And those are things that can build our resiliency throughout our life in everything we do. So there is a lot of positive in what we do, but we also can't neglect the fact that it does have an impact. Why vicarious trauma? Well, we do this work because we care, because we're naturally empathetic. We don't go into any kind of healthcare profession because we don't like people. Well, really, seriously. It doesn't pay enough to do that. But we go into these kind of roles because we're empathetic people. And that's what makes us good at and committed to our work. But it's also what can make it most challenging. Have that greater impact. There is an emotional price to caring. When I first started talking about vicarious trauma, there was never anything in the news about it. There was never anything in articles about it. And people would sort of look at me and think I was off the grid. And now we see it. Now we see it quite frequently. We read in lots of journals, we'll read about the emotional price of caring. So what is it? It's the psychological impact of repeatedly bearing witness to another person's trauma. It's not experiencing the trauma yourself. It's bearing witness to the trauma of others repeatedly, not just once, but over and over again. What happens to your neurological, physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual health when you listen to traumatic stories day after day, or respond to traumatic situations while having to control your own reaction? And that's part of the key. When we hear our friends' stories or we walk with them through possible traumatic events, we don't have to control our emotions, our friends and our family, because we're walking with them through that, and we don't have to keep that emotional front. When you're with your clients, you walk with them many times through their traumas, having to keep in check. Do you know what I'm talking about? That's the key. So who's affected by vicarious trauma? Well, take a look at the list. It's pretty significant. And I would think, is there anybody in this room who's not represented on that list? No?
Yeah.
Yes?
We have engineers, architects,
And do they walk with their families through their life experience? Yes. They're healthcare professionals. In this instance, you're a healthcare professional. So what are the signs of vicarious trauma? They are similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's what you're going to start seeing in journal articles now. Possible physical effects? GI problems, headaches, grinding of teeth, that sort of thing. Sleep disturbances, possibly sleeping nightmares, pain, an unidentified pain, not knowing what that may be. Possible cognitive effects, hypervigilance, and we're going to talk about hypervigilance in a minute, which is that hyperarousal. Impaired thinking, poor concentration, confusion, you can read the list, intrusive images, difficulty making decisions. You can see how these things can start impacting us in our workplace. And they do. Let's talk about that hypervigilance. That's the necessary manner of viewing the world from a threat-based perspective, having the mindset to see the events unfolding as potentially hazardous. Now you look at that and you think, that's not what I do. How much of your job is assessment of potential risk or hazard? Isn't that what we're meant to do? We're meant to assess the situations and see how we can prevent the hazard, how we can prevent the problems from coming. So we're constantly in a state of hypervigilance when we're at work, always looking to see what we can do to prevent what might happen or what might be coming based on what we're seeing. It's the body's way of increasing survival through heightened function. And there's a general sense of energy to meet and overcome any of the threats that are challenging the body's capacity to survive. Now, we don't think of ourselves coming to work like that. However, when we're at work, we're on duty, we have that hyperarousal. We're alive, we're alert, we're on. Many people talk about that, being on all day long. Energetic, we're involved, sometimes we're really funny. See, we're above that normal range of risk on a daily basis. Now, sometimes it's not quite as high as others, but a good lot of the time, that's how we function daily. When we're off duty, see the bottom row there? See that for every action, there's a reaction? When we're off duty, we end up quite often underinvested. And that's where we're tired, detached, isolated, and apathetic. Now think for a minute. Have any of you gone home on a frequent basis, sat down in front of the TV with the remote, and just done a lap? Maybe 2, maybe 3. Don't even know what you're watching, you're just doing a lap? Uninvested? Apathetic? Do people often have to almost come up and stare at you and ask you to pay attention to what they're asking for? Do you go home thinking, I just want to vent, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to talk to anybody, don't let the phone ring. For God's sake, I don't want to answer that phone. I don't want to talk to anybody tonight. Now, some of you may be looking at me thinking, she lives a weird life. And others may be looking at me thinking, why is she talking about that? Because that's part of the price of caring. That's the hypervigilance. We're on, and then we're off. We don't necessarily live in that normal range of risk because of the work that we do. There's some emotional impacts of vicarious trauma we'll take a look at. Numbness, feeling nothing, being overwhelmed, the grief reactions, the fear of harm to self and or loved ones, feeling abandoned, helpless. I can give you an interesting story. I told you this is near and dear to my heart because part of my 40-year career, I was in private practice counseling and consulting. Probably full-time, I was in practice for about 8-10 years. I still have the practice, but it's not full-time, of course. And most of the work I did was with adult survivors of long-term childhood abuse. And so I was listening to people's stories, probably disclosed to for the first time many, many, many times a day. And I loved my work. I worked with 3 other women, and I loved my work. We did great work. It was fascinating. It was very rewarding. But I didn't realize that there was an impact to me happening here. And when I talk about fear to myself or my loved ones, I was a young mom at the time. My kids were growing up. And I'll tell you, every time I heard an ambulance and my kids weren't home, I was panic-stricken. And I would say to my husband, where are the boys? Do you know where the boys are? Did you hear that ambulance? Well, we live close to Bishop Grandin, and I'll tell you, we are every ambulance that goes from both ends of St. Patel and Fort Garry. And he'd look at me and he'd go, what are you talking about? I don't hear anything. Like, where are you? And I thought there was something wrong with him. I was constantly afraid of harm to my kids. And it was over the top. But I didn't think it was. One day I went to a hockey practice. I think it was a practice. Yeah, probably was a practice with the moms. And our kids had been together the night before. And I said to them, I thought, well, they're going to know what I'm talking about because my husband. And I said to them, did you hear those sirens last night? And they looked at me and they didn't know what I was talking about. And I thought to myself, whoa, who's got the problem here? Is it me or is it them? And I started to think about where else am I overreacting to things? And that's one of the signs that you might see. And it often comes out in the feeling of the fear of harm to self or loved one. Inability to experience pleasure, just sort of that nothing's really as joyful as it used to be. Shame about no longer feeling like the warm, compassionate, and optimistic person the caregiver once was. And a reduced tolerance for what is perceived as others' petty problems. Now, generally, caregivers are caregivers not just of their clients, but a lot of the time, caregivers are caregivers for their whole family, and often their neighbors, often their friends. Who do you call? Somebody that's in the system, somebody that knows about healthcare, right? There's a few people nodding, so I think a couple of you know what I mean. Sometimes, though, when you get those calls, your sister calls, and she had a bad day at work, and you just think, oh my God, lady, that's what you're worried about? Like, maybe give you a quarter and you can buy yourself a problem. Because all day you've heard people who are thriving or trying to survive in their experiences, which are way out here, compared to having a really bad day at work. And, you know, have you ever experienced that sense? That people really don't know what a problem is sometimes? Yeah, that's because of what you see and work with. Remember, you also see the positive side of that because you see the resilience of human beings, but you also witness and walk through the tragedy. Some of the behavioral problems or effects of vicarious trauma are irritability, withdrawal, excessive silence, inappropriate humor, increased self-criticism, decreased eating, and increased use of substances. Now, that's an interesting one, the increased self-criticism, because normally people who are more likely to experience vicarious trauma are really high performers. People who work very hard at doing a very good job. And of course, having worked with the people at SSCY, I can tell you I'm looking at a room full of those kind of people. And what happens is when we start experiencing some of these symptoms or effects, we look to ourselves as maybe not being good enough, maybe not knowing enough, maybe not being smart enough, maybe not understanding it well enough. We look to ourselves as being the cause of the problem. And that's oftentimes the increased self-criticism. That was one of the things that happened to me because I started experiencing these things as I'm talking about. And I started saying, I guess I'm not smart enough to be doing this work. I must not be compassionate enough. Everybody around me must be better at this. I've got to learn more. I've got to go to more workshops. I've got to read more. And thank goodness I work at Blue Cross as well, at AAP. This was years ago, and I was in the office waiting for a client. And there was an article on the table, and those of you who've heard me speak about this before, was an aha moment for me, and I just wish I had got the name of the person who wrote the article. And I was in the kitchen, and it was sitting on the table, and so I picked it up and I was reading it, and it was a female psychologist, I know that much. And I can actually see the article in my mind's eye, but I cannot remember her name. And I was reading this thing, and it was talking about me. It was talking about this. It was telling me that this was a normal response of people who worked in helping fields, and that I could do something about it. And she gave him me. And up until that point, I thought it was me. I thought there was something wrong with me. And God forbid I would tell my colleagues in my private practice, because they would just remind me how bad I was. Well, I took that article, I looked at it, and I went, oh my God, I have to have this. And I didn't copy it, and I should have. Because the next morning I went back to my practice and I said to my colleagues, guess what? I've learned something about myself, and thank goodness, because I can do something about it. So we opened the whole door there for ourselves and learning how to take care of ourselves. And this is an impact of the work we do. So it happens, and it happens and you don't even know it. Some of the other behavioral effects of vicarious trauma, now take a look at these ones. Becoming judgmental of others. Think about you, think about your colleagues, think about your workplace. Tuning out. Reduced sense of connection with loved ones and colleagues. Cynicism. Losing hope for a sense of meaning. Developing those overly rigid, strict boundaries. That's a way of trying to protect. Feeling a heightened protectiveness. That's as a result of a decreased sense of safety for loved ones. Excessive caregiving on and off the job. Not knowing when it's not your job to do it. And avoiding. So in order to address vicarious trauma, we need to take a look at these three things. A, B, C. It's really easy. Vicarious trauma can be an occupational hazard, but you can do something to prevent it and to walk yourself through it. Starts with awareness, an awareness of ourself, our own needs, our own body, our own limits, emotions, strengths, and resources. Awareness. Awareness that vicarious trauma actually exists, but being aware of ourselves, paying attention and cluing into ourselves. How often do we put our own thoughts, our own needs, our own pain on hold because we have to get this done? Anybody done that? And I'm paying the price for it right now. Sometimes we don't learn. I let my pain in my mouth go for a week and a half because I had to teach. And of course, I was entering into a new job, so I had to be at work. So I had an abscess tooth is not healing because I decided that wasn't as important as being at work. How often do we do that? Being aware is something we have to work on every day. Balance. Finding balance in every area of our life. Work, play, rest. A balance between our mind, our body, and our spirit. And a balance between caring for ourselves and caring for others. And that's hard when you're in the prime of your career. And many of you are doing very well at work, but you're also raising a family whose needs are very important. And finding that balance of caring for yourself as well as work and your family, very important. Or those who are dealing with aging parents and having to care for them. It's so important to be able to find that balance. That's caring for yourself. That's also one of the ways we work with preventing the impact of vicarious trauma. Awareness, balance, and connection. Connection to yourself, to others, and to something larger. Building resilience, acknowledging that vicarious trauma may be an occupational hazard. Not everybody experiences a significant impact of it. We all are impacted by the stories we hear, but not everybody experiences a significant impact from it. But we can. Accepting reactions as normal responses to specialized work. You do specialized work. Purposeful self-reflection. That's got to be one of the hardest things we ask people to do, is actually self-reflect in a purposeful way. Oftentimes we think, oh yeah, I thought about that. And we think, I wasn't at the core of it. There wasn't anything I did. Purposeful self-reflection. How was my day? Did anything really impact me today? Was anything more unusual than it could have been? You know, was I very happy about something? Did something thrill me? Did I celebrate those small things, or did I just let them go because I was too busy? Self-care and self-nurturing. This is a good one. As a counselor, I often talk to people about self-care, and they'll say to me, oh yeah, I do that. What do you do? Because I'm honestly interested in saying, I go to the spa once a year. That's not self-care, folks. Self-care is something you do routinely. It's very nice when you're able to do those other things, but self-care is routine. Even coming here this morning, my husband actually brought me off, bless his heart. I knew I was going to be late, and I was panic-stricken. So I had to kick into self-care. I turned on classical music on the radio. I had to say to myself, I am where I'm meant to be. Some things are unavoidable. Do the self-talk. Purposeful self-care is not necessarily just doing things outside of yourself. It's that mind chatter. It's settling it down. It's learning how to do self-talk that's helpful. It's taking care of the little things. That's self-care, and it's routine. It becomes an everyday thing. Asking for help when you need it. That's generally a very difficult one for people in healthcare, because we help others. That's what we do. So asking for help when we need it can be very, very difficult. But think about it. Why is it just everybody else that needs help? Can't we? And taking mental health breaks purposefully. Knowing when you've had enough. When you need a break. Not just laughing about it and saying, oh, that's a mental health break. Asking yourself, when do I need that? When is it time for me to just relax and rejuvenate? And to possibly not hear anything today that's going to be too stressful for me. I don't need to hear another trauma. Developing a supportive work environment which acknowledges and accepts discussion of your reactions. How many of you are able to talk to your peers when you see or repeatedly see something that's disturbing you? How many of you can go to your peers and say, well, that was hard. I've seen about enough this week. Or I really felt helpless when so-and-so was in, and I can't make a big difference in their world. I can only see the little difference and help them with that. How many of you can sit and actually share that with one another? We know it happens, but do we actually allow ourselves that freedom to talk to one another? Create an organizational climate that encourages and supports self-care. Encouraging your colleagues, take your lunch. Have a break. Don't just complain about you can't have your lunch. You're always working through your lunch. You know, how many times do we hear people at work say, I haven't even had time to pee today? Well, whose fault is that? But we do that because we're really not thinking about ourselves. Limiting exposure to traumatic material. This is a good one, because remember I talked about the hypervigilance? Many people like to maintain that sense of being on an energy when we go home because that underinvestment feels bad. So, guess what's on TV, folks? ER, Chicago Fire, SVU. What kind of shows are you watching? Oftentimes they're violent. Oftentimes they're mimicry of the work that we do. ER. Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, and Chicago Med. What does that tell you? And what do? Those are the kind of things we watch. We watch movies that keep that going. We read books that keep that going. So one of the ways we can actually help prevent or look after ourselves is to limit that exposure to traumatic material, because what we're doing is we're reliving the trauma. We're keeping ourselves hyper vigilant and hyper aroused. Setting clear boundaries between home and work. Not taking work home all the time. And building a life away from work. That's huge. Vicarious trauma impacts healthcare workers and emergency response personnel. We saw that. I lived with a policeman. My father was a policeman. He died when I was 12 with a massive heart attack. My uncle lived next door. He was a policeman as well. They actually graduated at the same time in the same class. My uncle lived till he was 90. He's the longest serving police officer in the department. Now, I don't know how much of this was related to vicarious trauma, but I can certainly tell you there was a huge impact. My father was a true blue cop. That was his life. That was what everything he did, he lived being a police officer, and he was good at it. And all of his friends were policemen. Our whole life was surrounded by police officers. Well, my uncle next door, he didn't have a life away from work. My uncle was a very good police officer, very well respected, but he had a wonderful life away from work. He was a musician. And so when he wasn't at work, he had a life that was very fulfilling, that wasn't traumatic. My dad's life was spent rehashing the stories of what happened. But I remember that. I remember vividly listening to him and his cronies. I don't know if it had an impact, but I'll tell you, it made me develop a life away from work. Because I think that's a huge key. And the literature will tell you, develop a life away from work. Find your passion. What are you passionate about? Other than work, many of us are very passionate about work. I get accused of that a lot. That's fine, but we need to find our other passions and develop those. So healing means we need to learn how to relax. We need to invest in self-care. You're going to hear that time and time again here. All of those that you know, eating, sleeping, all that stuff, but vacations. Do any of you have to use up your vacation at the end of the year? You get those hints? Hey, you gotta use it up, folks. Well, let's take them. That's what they're there for. We need work-life balance. First-degree burnout, the soul snuffer, comes from living unbalanced for years, when what was supposed to be a temporary situation becomes a lifestyle. I love that phrase, a soul snuffer. Let's find balance. So our temporary situation of workaholism doesn't become permanent. Nourish your souls at least once a day. Do you ever think about that? How do you nourish your soul? Maybe today think about that. How have you nourished your soul once a day? And choose activities that replenish, and debriefing when needed. Vicarious trauma is not something any of us want. We don't seek out to have to manage a life having experienced it, but we can prevent it. Remember the ABC: awareness, balance, and connection. It can make all the difference in your work life. So you are well and able to be who you are wanting to be in the workplace and who your clients need you to be. I'd like each of you to make a list of the 5 significant people in your life. Just make a list in your head. Anybody need more time? So where are you on that list? That's what being aware is all about. Being connected, finding balance, and ensuring self-care. You've got to be on that list, folks. You don't have to be at the top, but you have to be on that list. And I'd like to leave you with this quote. Remember, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. Now I rushed through, I've done a few stories. That's all right, you don't need to hear my stories. Are there any questions? And I have to tell you, I've done this, I don't know how many times now, I really don't. And a few times I've left and there's been no questions in the past, and I thought, oh my God, they really thought I was off the wall, and they just didn't get it, and then I would hear people, and actually one of them was ran rounds at HSC for occupational therapy, and the room was pretty full, and I thought, well, they all stayed and they listened, and I thought it was okay, and nobody said a word. And so I said, well, thank you. And everybody left, and I thought, oh my God, that was bad. I don't know what I did wrong, but that's just the way it is. And then all of a sudden I got calls from quite a few of those OTs saying, could you come and talk to just my group? Could you come and share that with just the people I work with? And then I thought, oh, okay, there's a reason people aren't saying anything. Sometimes hearing about vicarious trauma touches home. It touches deeply, and sometimes it's something we don't want to hear, and we want to push it away. So if there aren't any questions, I understand that. If there are, please feel free to ask them. Yes, hi.
Do you have ideas or examples about how to facilitate this in the workplace? You know, the balance of healthcare is an easy thing to talk about and a hard thing to do. So how do leadership incorporate self-care fun breaks, or do you have any tips from groups you've talked to, or?
So the question is, how do you actually facilitate an environment in the workplace? Correct me if I'm wrong, Barb. An environment in the workplace that encourages self-care and supports it. Practicing it yourself if you're in a management level. For those of you who couldn't see it, the response was damn. That's one of the biggest things that I can tell you is helpful. And recognizing that it's not always possible every single day to do those things every day, but acknowledging, oh, this has been a week that I haven't been able to, but I'm going to today. Let's take lunch. Encouraging people to take their breaks. Encouraging people to end their day when their day ends instead of staying late. And doing that yourself as much as possible. Healthcare is a demanding place to be, and you're absolutely right. Our resources are dwindling. Every one of us is pushed to the max. I recently got what people call a promotion. It's not a promotion, it's an addition. They didn't replace my old job, I still got to do it too. And many of us are in those kind of situations. And so one of the things is recognizing my boundaries. When have I reached my limit, and when can I say no? And what's the consequence if I say no? I don't know if that was helpful, but not what you want to hear. But okay.
At this point, I used to work with children.
I know.
Pretty intense area. And I found that if people who didn't belong in the area floated through, for instance, a musician they had a clown, sometimes the sports people would come through, it broke it up for everybody. And it made people kind of go somewhere else for a little while. And right in your work environment, you can put in these people that really pass through and lighten the load of everybody around.
The suggestion for those of you who aren't in the room was that people who are able to pass through your work area, depending on where you work, like musicians and clowns and athletes and that sort of thing, can really lighten the load for everybody. And that's so very true. I also heard from one of the hospitals just the other day, they've started offering a mindfulness course at lunchtime for employees who are interested. Super idea. And they said the uptake has been very, very good. So if any of your own staff actually can teach mindfulness or meditation or something like that, that's another thing to offer. It really is a huge benefit for lots of reasons, but in vicarious trauma as well.
I
Yes.
think also staff and wellness program having like happening with the cycles. And so we make you come to your area and that's kind of like the day.
Yeah.
People got to sit down for
Yeah.
15 minutes.
So any of those things that you can actually bring into your workplace, sometimes students, you're able to invite students to come in, they need the practice hours. The real goal is awareness that you too could be impacted. And how are you seeking that balance and that connection? Okay, A, B, C. Quite easy, awareness, balance, and connection. Yes.
Kind of a pretty specific question to a group of people here, but as Barb mentioned, myself and the other engineers here, and luckily, I don't speak for everybody, but luckily, what I do here is my biggest passion, but it's also what I enjoy doing outside. So what I do here is design and build things for people I'm seeing that, and it's slightly traumatic, but then when I go home, my biggest, what the stress reliever and what makes me the happiest is to continue designing and building things, but for myself or other people. So basically what I'm trying to say is my biggest hobby is also what so yeah,
I would work on the connection part. That see the connection to others, the life away from that. It's fine to have that passion that you're building things for the people you care about, but it's also important to have that social that isn't involved in any kind of work. You know what I'm talking about there? How are you connected in socially, like building that connection? So you do spend time not doing what you do, don't you?
Build something.
Okay. Are you building the same things?
not quite, no.
Okay, well, that could be a bit of a difference. The other thing I hear from you is you gain a whole lot of satisfaction from that end product, and you celebrate that, and that's obvious. And that can be that building of the balance. You're celebrating what you're doing, and you're seeing the impact it may have. That can be a huge factor in just building our resilience, and that awareness of that celebration and doing, staying that connected, to really celebrate what you've accomplished and the impact it has, not just what you've accomplished, but the impact it has. That could be one of your saving graces. And I can't stress that enough. That's another answer to your question, Barb. Celebrating the successes with the staff. We don't take time to do that. We always have so much on our to-do list. And really, we need to, once every few months, sit down and say, what have we done? Like, what good work have we done in the past few months? There'll always be a to-do list, but let's take a look at what we've done and celebrate that. That's huge. It doesn't have to be lunch, and it can just be sitting at a staff meeting and saying, what are you most proud of in the past 3 months? Just asking the question. That would be huge. That's easy to do too. And for you as well. What are you most proud of? You don't have to answer that right now. But just asking yourself that regularly. Yes.
Blue Cross, I've given them this that they offer an EAP service. By the time you fight traffic on Empress, find a parking spot, make your way in the door. You are so stressed out. And I just said, you know what? If you set to the workplace, like on a rotating basis or whatever, people could book in, I don't know, $12 slots or whatever, just to unload some stuff. I just think that would be really helpful for a lot of people who maybe even have to take the bus there. You know, it's just not easy to do, to access that person or that outside of it. You can have a non-partial opinion of a certain thing.
You'd have to speak to your employer to see whether or not they would be willing to pay for that service in the organization. There's a long history of that, and it is helpful, but it has been shown that it's actually not necessarily as helpful to be able to see somebody in your workplace as it is to remove yourself from that space because of the privacy. So, yeah, but you speak to your employer because they may be willing to do that. It would cost, but is that something the employer can afford to do? Just a drop in. Yes.
That was kind of a specific example. So I'm thinking of a teacher in my life who I think this definitely applies to. How do you convince people that that disconnect at the end of the day, the mind numbing, watching whatever on TV, that isn't self-care.
Because people see that as self-care. Just leave me alone and let me keep doing this, and I'm looking after myself. Well, sometimes it might be, but if that's a routine and that's what you're doing to look after yourself, you've got to ask yourself that question: what purpose is it serving in my life? And really, if you're doing that every night, what purpose is that serving, folks? It's a disconnect, it's a total disconnection from reality, really, because you're not really, when you do those laps, you're not watching anything. You're not putting anything in other than it gives you something to press your thumb with. So just asking them if it's, if it's valuable to them. And even bringing to their attention that that's what they're doing. They may not be aware of that. My husband's a social worker, many of you know, because, and he used to do laps all the time. And he thought that was good. He was just, and I said to him, well, what good is that doing you or us? Like, what's behind that? Stop doing it and do something else, because it's not doing any, like, you're not getting anything out of that. So even having that conversation, I do sometimes turns into an argument, but having that conversation is bringing awareness to people that, like, what really is this? Because having the awareness is the first step, right? That maybe this isn't the most healthy thing for me to be doing, and there may be a reason that I'm doing this. Okay. Thank you so much, folks. I know you stayed over. I really appreciate the fact that you were able to wait for me. And I appreciate the fact you asked me to come out. I'm not an expert in this field. I'm passionate about it. If you have much more thirst for knowledge, Clinic offers a full day course on vicarious trauma. They actually offer a weekend course, I believe it is as well. Read about it. Okay? Look after yourself. That's what this is all about. Put yourself on that list. And enjoy doing the work you do, minimizing the impact it might have on you. So thank you very much and have a really good day.